Welcome to chapter 21, the first chapter of the second half of the textbook. These halves are relevant because our textbook on Marielme is based on the earlier Russian language pair of textbooks, Marийский язык для всех. Until now, we've been working through chapters based on the first volume, and now we are entering chapters based on the second volume. And there are going to be some changes as regards the texts. You might notice that we're shifting from having these having dialogues from a fictional family environment towards having texts based on more educational topics. And as regards the grammar we're learning, there'll be a gradual shift away from inflectional morphology towards derivational morphology and periphrastic constructions and semantics of modifiers, things like that. But we're not quite yet done with inflectional morphology. There's a bit more of that. So what have we specifically got on our plates in this chapter? First, we are going to start with something from the domain of derivational morphology. And that is a derivational suffix lik, borrowed from Turkic languages. This suffix is highly productive in Mari as it is in Turkic languages, and as in Turkic languages, it has a wide range of functions. The first of which is you can attach it to an adjective to form an abstract noun denoting the property marked by that adjective. You can go from having poyan, rich, to have poyanlik, wealth, riches. You can go from taza, healthy, to having tazalik, health. Usta, skilled, ustalik, skill, etc. Pashadame, unemployed, pashadamelik, unemployment. We haven't yet systematically looked at this privative suffix dme, which is privative meaning an adjective denoting the absence of something, so less. This is a very common combination, dme plus lik, resulting in dmelik, lessness. Just like in English, this suffix combination, lessness, is very common, hopelessness, etc. Yeah. And yeah, it's productive in this function. You can attach it to any adjective to denote, to create a noun denoting this property. It can also be attached to nouns to create adjectives. So it goes both ways. You can make nouns from adjectives and adjectives from nouns. And the adjectives you create are so-called purposive adjectives. They denote the purpose of a thing. What is it for? Corner, road, way, cornerlik, for a trip. Billet, ticket, billetlik, for a ticket. Well, let's look at these examples that I've got on the slides here in used in practice, what they might be. Cornerlik oksa, this is the road money, so it's the money for a trip, travel money. We have billetlik oksa, it is the ticket money, the money for a ticket. If we have kumitlik pasha, kumit 3, so you can see you can also attach it to numerals, long form numerals. It's the work for 3. Shuda or grass, shudalik olik is a hay meadow, a meadow where the grass is going to be used as hay, etc. So it's basically productive in the sense that you can do this with any noun you like. I wouldn't say that it's an exceedingly commonly used strategy, but you do encounter it. Not only can you attach it to nouns and numerals, like kumit in this example, you can also attach it to personal pronouns. But in that case, you attach it to the genitive forms. So if you have like myen, my, from me, I, you can have myen look meant for me. Like if you want to say, this is not for me, this movie is not for me, or something like that. You can do those. You can create these from the genitive forms of personal pronouns, myen look, teyen look, etc. Then a subcategory of this, we could say, are nouns denoting a thing that is for a specific purpose. And this I would now not classify as a productive usage. Don't do this at home. There's user forms that do this. If you have, for example, shincha, I, and you have shinchalik, which in like look, following the logic from the previous slide would be like for the eye, what is something, what is a noun of something that is for the eyes? Well, glasses. For a mosquito, a shanalik for the mosquito, what is something for a mosquito net, etc. Awa, mother, awalik, a womb. Near, nose, nearlik, a muzzle, like a dog's muzzle, etc. So yeah, these are like they're logical, but not necessarily predictable, the meanings we have. Many of these are loan translations from Turkic languages, like the word for glasses that we have here. Well, partial loan translation, because the look itself is actually Turkic. Yeah, so this is, these are, it's good for you if you're able to analyze these forms, but you don't have to produce them on your own. And in some cases, like there are some words formed with look of this type that where I, for the longest time studying more, I didn't even notice it was derived, a derived stem. I just learned them as individual nouns. Okay, we're staying in the domain of highly productive verbal, highly productive derivational morphology. And the next thing we're going to look at is the derivational suffix kt, a verb or derivational suffix. You can attach this basically to any verb. And if you have, for example, urgash, to sew, you have urgiktash, which is then to have somebody sew, to make somebody sew. This is a so-called causative derivation, to make someone or something, but mostly someone, but sometimes something, do something. Ishtash, to do, ishtiktash, to have somebody do something, to make somebody do something. Kudashash, to take off like an item of clothing. Kudashiktash, to have somebody take off an item of clothing, like if a doctor tells you to take off your shirt or whatnot. Shonash, to think. Shoniktash, to make somebody think, to plant the seeds of thoughts in somebody else. Yuash, to drink. Yuktash, to give somebody something to drink. Here, you would have like, we had a linking vowel after consonants, like in kudash, shuktash, from the verb stem kudash. But with the verb stem you would maybe expect a linking vowel too, but this is a so commonly used verb that if there was a linking vowel, it's been lost. An important one, on chash, to see, on chiktash, to show. Shochash, to be born, shochiktash, to give birth. So it's what the child does, what the mother does. Shulash, to melt, intransitive. Shuliktash, to melt something transitive. And here you see it's not always making somebody else do something. Sometimes it can be also making something do something. So this is a so-called valency changing operation. Valency is how many slots does a verb have? And if we have, for example, to live, that has a valency of 1. There's only one natural slot here, as subject, I live. If we have a transitive verb like to see, the valency is 2. There are 2 natural slots, I see you, subject, object. And we have a so-called ditransitive verb like to show or to send. The valency is 3 because we have 3 natural slots in here: subject, direct object, indirect object. Send me a letter. And KT is valency increasing in that it increases the valency of a verb by 1. We have already met another valency changing operation, which is alt. We're going to have another look at it at some point, I believe, but we have already met it. So let's just look at what we have in the domain of valency changing operations. What can we do going back and forth from on chash as an example, to see, which in its basic function has like the stem here has a valency of 2. I see you, subject object, 2 slots. We could have with alt a valency decreasing derivation and have on chaltash, to be seen, where you only the valency is 1. Or we could attach KT to it and have to show and suddenly have a valency of 3. Show me the money, subject, direct object, indirect object. That doesn't mean, however, that we can that if we attach both of these suffixes to a stem, which we can do, that they cancel each other out. Because if we add alt to onchiktash again, we end up having a verb onchiktaltash, which has a valency of 2 again, just like onchash, but of course it doesn't mean the same thing. It means to be shown. Like this show was shown to us or so. So we could still have the direct object here, but we no longer the subject, we could still have the indirect object here, was shown to us, but we wouldn't have the direct object anymore in this case. So the valency is back down to 2. And the fact that you can mix and combine the suffixes, this is one reason why we are treating this suffix as a derivational suffix, even though in Russian linguistic tradition, it is often marked as the marker of a reflexive voice. So it is treated in the same way as active passive might be in English or so. That this would be then considered, that alt would be considered the marker of the reflexive voice, and KT would be considered the voice, the marker of the causative voice. It's a legitimate interpretation, but we are not following it in our materials. Also, just because voice would be generally considered this as a category that a verb should fall into one of the categories. But as we can see, we can combine these suffixes with one another, which is more typical of derivational morphology. Also, rarely, but it's rare, but it is possible to recursively attach this KT suffix to a stem. So let's take the verb rash, for example, to get warm, like water is getting warm over the fire or whatnot. Valency 1, the water is warming up. We add KT to it. We end up having irektash, a transitive verb, meaning to warm something. I'm putting the water on the fire to get it warm. So subject and object. And then we could, in theory, do it again, attach another KT to it and get irektiktash, which would then have the valency 3, which is to get somebody to make something warm. Like I'm getting my sister to put the water on the fire. So there's like a string of causation here. Hypothetically, you could attach it more times than this. Practically, it's never going to happen. And Mars, I was thinking you're being a bit silly if you come along and say and try to make people keep track of how many people were involved in this string of causation. Quick look at the argument structure that we have with these derivations. If we, for example, take the verb yuash, to drink, transitive verb, like yuchachayim yuesh, the child drinks tea. If I say that I'm giving the child to drink, what you usually would do is me, yucham, yuktem, I, child, accusative, give to drink. So it's like feeding in English. I'm feeding the child would also take a direct object. But if I'm saying that I'm giving tea to drink, you would say michayim yuktem, also with a direct object. The tea is the thing that you're giving to drink. What happens when you have both? Well, in literary metamori, it is not usual, it's not conventionally accepted to have two accusative objects in a sentence. You can encounter this in dialects. You can even encounter it in literary texts, but prescriptive grammar tells you not to do it. So what do we do if we have a child that we are giving tea to drink? Well, then we have an indirect object with the dative, yochalantu, the child, and the direct object in the accusative, the tea. I'm giving to the child tea to drink. So dative, the person, the causee, the person who is made to do something, and accusative for the object of this activity. Yeah. And but then some verbs like shochiktash, to give birth, would just be, as Mars wouldn't even perceive this as a causative derivation of this even more, even though it is transparently analyzable, because it's such a commonly used verb that they just see it as a normal transitive verb. Okay, so much about the basic grammar that we have in this chapter. Some notes on word and word usage. An important plot thread throughout the second half of the textbook are going to be auxiliary constructions or converb constructions, whatever we want to call them. We have already met these constructions of the type "Jürgen Koltage," drinking, send, where you mean to drink something up completely, and the to send loses its core semantics, its lexical semantics, and primarily communicates an aspectual value to the situation. It transfers the whole structuring of an event that is sending something off, like sending off a letter, to the act of drinking, meaning that you have your liquid and you get rid of it and it's gone. The same way a letter is gone when you throw it in the mailbox. And we're going to be looking in this in the second half of our textbook. We're going to be looking at individual auxiliaries that are used in these pairings, where they either partially or completely lose their lexical semantics, and briefly discuss in the individual cases what they do when they occur in such situations. And today, in this lesson, we are going to look at three specific, 3 to 4 specific verbs used in pairings. We've got tolash, to come, which is used to indicate the gradual increase of the effects of an action. We have shogash, to stand, which is a durative marker, meaning that something is lasting over a long time. And then we have kodash, 2 times. That's why I was like split between 3 and 4. If we want to count this as 1 or 2 things, well, there are 2 different verbs. Kodash kodam, first conjugation, intransitive verb to stay somewhere. Kodash kodem, transitive verb to leave something somewhere, to make something stay somewhere. They are clearly etymologically connected, separate verbs that have basically the exact same function when they are used in auxiliary constructions, but there is one key difference. Maybe you can already guess it, but we're going to see it in practice. Yeah, and kodash, both of the kodash verbs are used when an action happens and has tangible results that extend beyond the end of the action. So it is, on the one hand, perfective, showing that the action, it is done and it is complete, but the stress here is on the persistence of a result, that something stays there. And this sets it apart, for example, from koltash, which we already saw it, where the focus lies on the destruction or the removal of the object, that the object of the action is no longer there afterwards. If you're drinking up your glass, your shot of vodka, it's gone and will never come back. Kodash is the same in that it is perfective, but the exact opposite in that here we are talking about things that are like left or created, that stay there after the end of the action. So let's look at these 3 ways to temporally structure happenings in practice. And if this graphic is still not making much sense, you can go back afterwards. Maybe it's going to make more sense then. So if we have tolash, to come, which was gradual increase. In spite of this, the Marilands grow in fame year by year. So it is Charlen Tolesh. And it's like literally, it's like the honor is spreading or so. The spreading, since we're talking about like something, the fame in this case, steadily but surely going up and up in this narrative, tolash is a good one to use, because we're talking about something that lasts a long time, but it is not stable in the sense that things stay the same. They're going upwards. Yeah, in the second example, we have another very optimistic reading of the Mar nation growing stronger year by the century. As the centuries go by, things get better and better. And the more bleak situation shown in the third sentence, where we're talking about the price of food rising, but salary staying the same. So we have this here, the whole rising of salaries depicted as something that lasts a long time, and is steadily increasing. Contrast this with shogash, another imperfective marker where we are now talking about truly stable situations, where we have forest covering half the land of the republic. That's the way it is. That's the way it's going to stay in this narrative. Or here, Ivan, who is always studying. Basically, it's also denoted as something steady. We're not seeing any increase in his studying. It's already quite high and it's staying there. Or spending 3 months preparing for a lecture, also depicted as a long-lasting but uniformly a long-lasting activity of uniform intensity. And here with Kodash, the two Kodashs, what we have to stay. Few people survived the battle, so they survived. They kept on living. The life continued afterwards. I always oversleep without the alarm clock. The sleeping continues beyond the alarm clock. So this was Kodash Kodam, to stay, and then Kodash Kodem, to leave something somewhere. Its transitive counterpart. I was kept in the school. So I was locked up in the school. I was locked in, and that kept me there as the tangible result of the locking activity. Or the Mari people that are preserving, literally like saving, keeping their customs. So the preservation of the customs has the tangible results of the customs stay there after the fact. Yeah, and so the difference between the two is the first is intransitive, the second is transitive. So we're looking at the difference between Nela and Jösse, two near cognate, not cognates, two near synonyms, both meaning difficulty and difficulties. But only Nela can also mean heavy. So something like Nela Chemudan, heavy suitcase, that makes sense. Jösse Chemudan, difficult suitcase, doesn't make any sense. You don't have that. So they can be used interchangeably in some situations, but not all, as is usual for synonyms. We're looking at different usages of vashtaresh, against, where we have the spatial sense of something being opposite, vis-a-vis of something, like across the street of something. We have against in a spatial but dynamic sense, moving against something, like walking against the wind. We can have it towards a date, like approaching a date, towards night, towards New Year's Eve or whatnot. We can have against in a figurative sense, not in the spatial sense, like looking for medicine against a virus or something like that. Yeah. So we also have a look at Nine, these demonstrative pronoun in this chapter, which does something that you might not expect at this point of your Mars studies. So if we look at one and many, like at a cat, one cat is ikperes, many cats is shukoperes. Since we have plurality already marked with shuko, we don't need to mark the plurality on the noun. We have piteperes, this cat, and we want to pluralize it. So instead of pite, this, we use nine, these. And now, like, depending on, if you don't know this, it might be surprising that the correct form now is Nine Peres Black. Here we do actually have double marking of the plurality. You might think, well, why do I need plural marking if Nina already marks plurality? But as per usual, languages are not obliged to match our expectations. We are in this chapter looking at ves and vese, two words meaning different. And the distinction between them when you will use one or the other, it is quite equivalent to the distinction that we have had with numerals, for example, where we had like ik pulem, one room, but if I ask how many rooms are there and I'd say only one, then I'd say ik de ganat, then I'd use the long form. Quite likewise, it is ves pulem, the other room, but if I want to say that's different, then I would use vese. And if I use it as a noun, the others, for example, then I use the long form vese again. And very often you will find iktische, vesische, the one, the other, with the possessive suffixes attached to both of them. If you're talking about, like, I don't know, two dogs ran down the street, and one was a Chihuahua and the other was a boxer, you'd say, iktische, besische. And the double mark, the possessive suffixes, this is the usage of the possessive suffix third person to mark that something is part of a greater whole, which is typical in Mari. We've discussed this before. That so there's a totality of the two of them, and then you have one and the other both marked with possessive suffixes. Starting in this chapter of our textbook, every chapter is going to have a little, or almost every chapter has a clip from Mari television from the 2010s. We gathered these clips with a transcript, and often these clips from television will include interviews with actual Mari speakers, and you might then at some point notice that Mari, as you learn in textbooks, is a somewhat idealized form of the language, and that in actuality there's a lot more code mixing and code switching with Russian. It's just a way that Mari speaks, that people speak, as is usual in a minoritized community, that there is mixing of the heritage language with the structurally superordinate language, let's say. And we can see this, for example, in the wide usage of Russian conjunctions and particles in Mari. Conjunctions like "e" and, or Russian "bot," like "oh, there," sort of like a word used in Russian to show, "oh, look there," or something like that. That's just something to get used to. Tungalash, to begin, we have already, I believe we've had this verb before. It is to start and begin in a wide range of functions, shall we say. It can be used intransitively if I want to say like that the meeting started, just subject and it began. It can be used to start an activity with the infinitive. If I say, for example, the rain started to rain, where we have them with an infinitive. And it can also be used transitively, like the singer started their rehearsal, where repetitium in the accusative. So all three of these functions, you just need one verb here, which is very nice because so many languages make you pick and choose a verb for to start depending on which one of these three basic functions we have. But Tungalash has another widely used function, a grammaticalized function even, and that is that it can be used as a marker for a future tense marker. I want to call it tense or not, it's a question now. But so if I say, for example, Mari muro vlak jongash tunalet, as we have, this is from one of the news clips, it means that Mari songs will be heard, literally will start to be heard. But it is clear that we're talking about something in the future here. Or I can say, after I have a child, I will literally begin speaking Mari with the child. But we mean then with beginning that we're going to do it in the future. So this is useful for Mari, a language that doesn't have a future tense. But you don't always use this. And you can't or shouldn't always use it. Mari native speakers wouldn't always use it. Here are some examples that we see at the bottom where Mari native speakers would not use Tungalash as a future tense marker. Like if I say, I'm going to kill him, you wouldn't use Tungalash here because this is a perfective thing. It marks something that you generally, if you're talking about killing somebody, this is usually something that happens in a moment you're unlikely to be speaking while you are in the act of doing this. And this you have in many languages, that you have like more perfective utterances will by default be read as future tense because they are incompatible with being contemporaneous with the act of speaking. And I mean, it's not a systematic in English, but it does work if you say in cases like the train's leaving tomorrow at 11 o'clock or something like that. It's grammatically present tense, but it is understood to be a reference to the future. And yeah, in this part of the textbook, we're also going to be looking at some animals and plants. So here, nothing much I can say on it. We've got a bunch of pretty pictures of pretty animals with their Mari names. and you should learn these. So the text in this chapter is the first of the educational texts we're going to be looking at. Now we're just going to look at the lands of the Mari Kundem, and learn some history and learn some numbers, and also learn some folk wisdoms. And in the first YouTube clip that I have, so for each of these news clips, I've also linked to a YouTube clip. But you can also get the MP3 file of these recordings from the course website in case the YouTube clips ever disappear. And here we've got the transcription of that text, and this pertains to bilingual announcements at the railway station in Jyväskylä. So that was it for the first chapter of the second half of the textbook. See you in the next one.